the Angels have been great. You know who hasn't been great? It's the Red Sox.
Yep. They've been kind of disappointing so far, and I picked them as a playoff team. Not sure where that stands now. I think we're going to talk about that a little bit towards the end. But they just have not been good. They're last in the AL East, below the Orioles at 11-20. And they've just had poor performances all year. It's been the pitching a little bit. And, they haven't won a series this season, which is... Who would have guessed that the Red Sox would be in this position? I mean, they've got all their weapons. They've got, obviously, Bogarts, obviously Devers, JD Martinez... Verdugo. I mean, they've got a lot of weapons, and Chris Sale's been hurt, which has hurt their pitching. But they just aren't showing up on any facet of the game right now, and they're really just struggling to win baseball games right now.
You're right. They do have all those weapons, and a lot of those guys are putting out seasons that I think we would expect. I think we would expect from Devers and Xander maybe a little higher than like an 850 OPS, but that's still a productive bats in the middle of your lineup that you'd expect to at least win a series so far. And there's a couple culprits that I'll come down to. They've scored the fourth least most runs in the league. So they've got numeric production from some of their stars, but they just really have not been able to put runs on the board, which I think will balance out over time. But the other thing is the bullpen. They have the most blown saves in the league, and their leader in saves, the team leader, has one save.
Yeah, and I think the biggest thing is, Xander Bogaerts has been one of the best offensive shortstops in the league thus far, but I think the biggest thing is their big shortstop acquisition in the offseason, which was Trevor Story, and he has not been good for them thus far. Maybe it's adjusting to the rough Fenway crowd. They're a great crowd, don't get me wrong, when they're playing well, but they can be tough as well, and he's learning second base. But he only has one home run this season, and that came yesterday. We're recording this, what's today, Thursday? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so he got his first home run yesterday, and he's just been struggling thus far at the plate, and he's hitting 206 with a 268 weighted on-base average at 73 WRC+. plus, and it's been rough for Trevor Story. Number of things you can blame it on. Maybe it's learning a new position, maybe it's the crowd, but bottom line is he just hasn't been there for them.
Yeah, and 73 WRC+ plus is better than Whit Merrifield. We found out the other day has a 0 WRC plus, bottom in the league. That's just, how is that even possible?
He did have a good day yesterday though, so maybe it's like at a 3 right now.
Very true. And I think it's interesting that we can bring in some of those other free agent shortstops because all of them, I would say, as a whole so far, have been disappointing. Semien is, I think, the worst of the bunch compared to Story because he still doesn't have a home run. It was normally everyone talks about Story and Semien, neither of them have home runs. And Story's one ahead now.
Yeah, and Semien, he was third in the MVP voting in the AL last year, and he was up there for home run leader. I don't remember how much he finished off, but he's hitting 171, 40 WRC+, plus, and his teammate in Texas, Corey Seager, who we mentioned Semien as probably the worst of the bunch so far. Seager's probably the best of the bunch so far, and it's still not great. It's above average in terms of the rest of the league, but not what we've seen Seager do. He's hitting 243 with 6 home runs. He's gotten hot a little bit recently. He had a bomb the other day. He had a 2 home run game the other day. He has a 116 WRC plus, and then the other 2 big names were Javi Baez and Carlos Correa. Javi Baez is hitting 224. So Javi Baez isn't known for his high batting average, but he only has 2 home runs. He's kind of known for that pop and explosive bat with an 84 WRC plus. And Carlos Correa, who's heating up before he got hurt a little bit, he's only hitting 255 with 2 home runs and 110 WRC plus. And this kind of, maybe it's for the whole people or whole group here. They all got paydays, and maybe they're just having trouble living up to their contracts. So we'll see if they settle in. Maybe it's like a Lindor situation where he struggled last season. Maybe they'll start to figure it out and then heat up down the line.
Yeah, I definitely think they will. The problem right now is the contract thing. It's like you're paying them a lot of money. And I know like Baez got less than the whole group, but the rest of them, like huge contracts. And even if they're playing okay, like as long as they're above league average, it's just not enough when you consider how much you're paying them. So that's kind of the main thing to think about. But Story has really kind of plagued this Red Sox offense, especially for the money they're giving him. And you mentioned the Fenway crowd. Like all of Boston hates Trevor Story right now. And that's kind of that. You're right. That is a tough thing when you're coming from Colorado, where you're kind of always the darling player to fans. Everyone loves you, especially then Arenado gets traded and you're the only thing the fans have to hold on to now in Boston where everyone kind of hates you. It's pretty tough.
Yeah, and the future for the Red Sox team as a whole is kind of in question right now, and we could see them turn it around if Trevor Story starts to heat up the rest of the lineup. The pitching can be what we know it can be. They're have relatively young. If Chris Sale comes back, they can still compete for a playoff spot, but it kind of asks the question, can they bounce back or will they kind of fizzle out and crumble this season?
So yeah, I think that they're much better than this. The peripherals around them are very confusing, but then again, they're having good offensive production when you look at like the single layers, except for Trevor Story, who also I think will bounce back a little bit. But the fact that they've only scored the fourth most runs in the league with the kind of numbers that they do have at the top of their lineup, I don't think that's very sustainable. I think they'll start to get under the ball a little bit more, start putting more home runs out at Fenway, at other places. I think they're going to middle out a little bit in runs scored because they do have single and individual offensive production. Eventually, that's going to come together. I mean, right now they're playing like a team like the 2020 Mets, who had one of the higher team WRC pluses in baseball, but scored not that many runs. And I think that's kind of what the Red Sox are going to be. They're going to come back, and I think they're going to score more runs over an 162-game season. They'll eventually get Chris Sale back. I think the bullpen will tighten up a little bit. They've got to use Garrett Whitlock as a closer. They've got to have some guy who can go in there and get saves. They cannot keep blowing as many as they have. And I think that you're going to see a little bit of a regression to the mean that we normally see over a 162-game season. I'm not going to go as far as to say they're this year's Braves who struggled out of the gate and then went on to win the World Series, but do I think they can get back in that conversation for the playoffs? Absolutely. Do I think that they can beat out the Orioles and not come in last in the AL East? I would bet an obscene amount of money on that.
If the season were to not if the season were to end today, but if you were to ask me a prediction for the playoffs, I still think the Red Sox will compete for a playoff spot. I can't guarantee that they will get one, but I think they'll bounce back. But if they don't, it's very interesting for this team because do they become sellers at the deadline? They've got a lot of free agents coming. Bogarts, we've seen contract extensions kind of not going anywhere, and hearing some rumors he might be out. JD might be he is a free agent. They might trade him. Kike is a free agent. Even Rafael Devers, who we've seen extension talks kind of the same as Devers or as Bogarts so far. He's got one more year of team control, but then he's a free agent. So it'll be very interesting if this team might become sellers at the deadline, kind of similar to where we saw the Cubs, because when the Cubs became sellers last year at the deadline, they were still in contention for a playoff spot, but you kind of saw they had Baez, Rizzo, and Bryant free agents, so they're like, all right, we're not going to go all in for a maybe wild card spot because they didn't like their chances to win it all. So they wanted to get something back from their stars. So we could see a similar situation for the Red Sox. And I don't know if that would leave Trevor Story because, I mean, they just paid him, like I said. So I know they're trying to pay Devers and Bogarts, but they're not really engaging in talks with them. So it'll be very interesting if they turn into a fire sale team. I mean, that would be insane for the market, and it could be one of the better trade deadlines this season.
Yeah, it would be. You're right. It would be insane for the market that the Jeff Passan would be just going off, and we'd be hearing probably all about, Kike could be on the move, Bogarts could be on the move, JD I think would absolutely be on the move. Devers I'm not quite sure about. I think him and Story would probably be the two guys they keep around, but do they look to move someone like Alex Verdugo? Do they move a Nathan Eovaldi, which I think would be huge? I think it's definitely a possibility. If they don't turn it around, could definitely see it. They're going to have to move some of them. I think Bogarts and JD would be solid locks if they don't turn this around and don't see a way to make the playoffs, that they would trade them. And then it's interesting with those two guys and maybe others to think about where they could possibly go. And the name that I was kind of sticking on the other day was Bogarts to the Brewers. He's not good enough defensively to play short. You could trade for him, put him at second. You've got Adames at short and Bogarts at second. They need, I think, if they can add one more big piece in that lineup. I know they've scored the second most runs, but adding that piece could be huge, and you wouldn't have to give up all that much. And they have the money, I think, to extend him long term if they do.
I think there's a lot of teams that could use Xander Bogarts, a lot of contenders, because we see teams like the Cardinals, Braves, who have Dansby Swanson becoming a free agent this year, so if the Braves want to pay him, the Yankees and the Angels, these are all contending teams that could really use that bat in their lineup. And I think Bogaerts, we've seen, like I mentioned, he's been one of the top offensive shortstops this season. So I really think a lot of contenders could be in the market for him if they do sell. And I think that would be very interesting to see. The Brewers, maybe. I think it could happen for sure. But I think a lot of these teams could use him maybe at shortstop rather than a positional move.
If the Yankees weren't the Red Sox biggest rivals in the entire world,
I didn't think about that aspect. Correct.
I would say
he's not going to the Yankees.
I would say that is absolutely perfect. They missed out on every free agent shortstop this offseason, but if they could land Xander Bogaerts and then extend him, like that would be dream for the Yankees if he wasn't coming from Boston.
No.
That would be.
And I mean, maybe if he becomes a free agent, they sign him, but we'll see. I think maybe they save and spend on Correa when he opts out of his deal. So, but the other pieces that could be moved is JD Martinez, and where do you think he can end up?
So I was originally thinking about JD to the Blue Jays, but you put a note in there, and I think you're right. They might be a little too right-handed dependent, but it's just going to be one of those teams that just wants to add one more reliable bat. Could be the White Sox too. We've seen them; they do not have depth. So whenever one of their guys goes out, we've seen Eloy go out, we've seen Moncada go out. Their lineup really struggles, and I don't think they really want to be starting Gavin Sheets every day. We saw him drop that fly ball out and right, and the announcer used some interesting language to describe his displeasure at Gavin Sheets dropping it. But I think there's going to be a lot of teams out there that could use him. You put the Giants down. It's definitely a possibility. They've got Jock at DH, though, for a lot of games right now. Darren Ruff, too. They could switch Belton at DH, too. So I don't know if he'd really fit. But a team like the White Sox, some team that could really just use depth or a reliable bat in their lineup. And I think it's going to be teams that are buying in order to give themselves an extra boost. So the White Sox, Blue Jays make sense for me.
And I think JD Martinez, a lot of teams could use that right-handed power bat. I mean, maybe the Rays as well. We saw them make a move for Nelson Cruz a few years ago. It'd be a pretty similar move. The Giants, I mean, a right-handed bat would help them because they've been a team that's been home run dependent, as you know, the last few years. So that would help them. I think there's a lot of teams that could use a lot of these players. And I think if they do sell Kike Hernandez, who's going to be a free agent, a lot of teams can use him, his versatility, and a bench bat down the stretch. So I think it'll be very interesting to see what these Red Sox do come deadline if they don't turn it around.
Yeah, I think Bogaerts to the Phillies, too, could be a move if they want to play into that extra bad defense, good hitting, which they've got pretty much at every spot in their lineup so far. So there's a lot of possibilities. Let us know down in the comments if the Red Sox sell, where do you think some of these guys go? I think that would be something interesting. But, the Red Sox so far have been very disappointing. I'd argue most disappointing team in the league, and I don't think many people would disagree. If you thought through 31 games they'd be at the bottom of the AL East, even below the Orioles, I'm pretty sure you'd be lying. So it's unfortunate, but then again, they were a playoff team last year and a damn good one at that. So I think they turn it around. It's just a matter of, can they turn it around enough to get themselves in the playoffs, and not only in the playoffs, to be able to compete with even some of the behemoths in their division, in the Blue Jays and the Yankees and the Rays.
Yeah, it'll be tough to win in that AL East because, Yankees are running it right now. We thought the Blue Jays would, and Blue Jays, they've been playing well, but not what we think they can do. So it'll be interesting seeing the AL East going forward.